Good morning. I think we're going to go ahead and get started this morning, so if folks could find their seats. As we get started, why don't we gather in prayer? Great and loving God, we thank you for this opportunity to be together to make new connections and strengthen old ones. We thank you for this time away that you have provided us to focus on our ministry and our relationships. But God, we are also mindful of those who we left behind, who picked up a little extra slack, who took on extra responsibilities so we could be here. We think of our colleagues and our families and our friends who made it possible for us to be here. We pray that you ease their burden while we are here. And now, God, we ask that you bless this time, that you bless our conversation, and you continue to be ever present with us. We ask these things in the name of the Christ, and all God's people say, Amen. So, good morning. So, we are going to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about some of the realities that you all might recognize in your mid-council. We've asked 6 colleagues up to spend a little time talking about what challenges, what changes they see or have seen in their mid-council, as well as maybe some of the strategies or a strategy that they've used to address some of those challenges. So they're going to share some learnings with us this morning. You see the list of folks, and we're going to have them introduce themselves as we go down the row. But we're going to do about 5 to 10 minutes for each person. And then we're going to ask you to do some table talk about what resonated with you from what they said and what was missing and what that might mean for you in your context. And then we'll come back together for some question and answer period and even some sharing that you all, some of the findings that you all had. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. I think we're just going to go in the order that they appear on the screen. So, Forrest, lucky you.
Good morning. So I'm Forrest Clausen. I am co-executive and stated clerk of the Presbytery of Los Ranchos down in Southern California. Tom Kramer is my fellow co-executive. His title is Mission and Vision and Mission, and my title is Governance and Congregational Leadership. He may tell you a different story about what's going on in Los Ranchos. This is my take on things, but I think that you'll hear some things that probably resonate, and hopefully he will too. I want to start with a quote that didn't come from Desmond Tutu, though some people think it did. It actually comes from a German playwright that I've never heard of. It says, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land, and they said, let us pray, so we closed our eyes, and when we opened our eyes, they had the land and we had the Bible. And then the apocryphal story goes on that maybe Desmond Tutu added the line, but we got the better deal. Well, whether he said it or not, I'd like to use that as kind of the theme for what I'm about to say here. Because I'd say that something that was kind of true for us is that when the soon-to-be eco-churches came to us, they had the Bible and we had the land, and they said, let us negotiate. We closed our eyes, and when we opened them, they had the land and we had the Bible. But maybe we got the better deal. So we've lost a lot in the last 5 years. We've lost 9 churches and 1 new church development. We may lose 2 or 3 more. We've lost over 10,000 members. We have lost over $60 million in real estate value, and that's net, not counting the amount that they did give us. And so we are now down to 45 congregations, 12 worshiping fellowships or new missional communities, and exactly, I'm impressed by this, 9,999 members as of last December 31st. And most painfully, we have lost our naivete. So we're figuring out who we are. And we're doing good work like discerning vision and mission and coming up with a value statement and aligning our staff and our structures in accordance with that kind of thing, because we can't continue doing things the way we did. But when I think about that quote that Tutu didn't say, I find myself wondering if maybe there's something about who we're becoming that is gradually taking shape in God's work, that we are gaining the Bible, that we're finding the words in Leviticus 19 to be coming true, to treat the foreigners among ourselves the same way we would treat those who were born here. We speak 8 primary languages on any given Sunday morning. That's a reality of Southern California. 5 of those languages are Asian, and as you can well guess, one of them is Korean, and that's by far the largest of the second after English languages within our presbytery. We have gone from 4 Korean churches out of 45 congregations to 9 Korean churches after the closure of the Western Hanmi Presbytery back in 2014. So 20% of our congregations are Korean speaking. And what we are learning is that 20% of our congregations are Korean thinking. And if you've ever tried to translate Korean on Facebook into English or run it through Google Translate, you'll realize that there is no one-to-one correspondence in the way that kind of thing works. So it's been a work to find our way together to talk about what it means to be in ministry with each other. Our COM is stretching itself in ways that it hadn't expected. And we began just with kind of a little thing, and we hope that it'll make progress along the way. We bought a system kind of like what they use at the United Nations, where there's a translator, a live translator professional in the background, and people wear earpieces to hear what the translator is saying, so that at Presbytery meetings, the folks who are Korean speaking can participate as fully as possible. We know we're still asking them basically to come and be like us. But what we are communicating is that we want them around, and they've picked up that fact. The second thing that we're living out as far as the Bible is concerned is the work of Ephesians 4, the idea that church leaders, their purpose is to resource ministry, not to do ministry. So when we were a large, wealthy presbytery, our staff did the work. Our staff planned the work, our staff got the committees to authorize the work, our staff carried it out. And what we're finding is that we can't really pull that off anymore. So we are becoming a lot more like many of you in terms of the idea that the committees are the ones that plan the work, carry out the work, and the staff come alongside to help. We've got a long way to go in this, but I think we've got a good model even in the relationship that I have with Tom, that there is no person who is in charge, that rather the mission is what is in charge of the presbytery, and we come alongside one another as servants of the presbytery. I was talking with somebody just a couple nights ago, and he commented on the coach of the Golden State Warriors, saying it's amazing what you can do when nobody insists on getting credit for it. I think we're finding our way in that, and I'm really grateful that I have a partner like Tom in that respect. And so I find myself then wondering if that one last piece for us is going to happen, where we really grab hold and find that even though maybe we've lost a bunch of land, we'll have something in the Bible. And in particular, what I'm thinking of here is from Luke 6. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. We're still getting there with regard to some of the folks who did some of the things 4 or 5 years ago. But at the end of the day, I want it to be said of Los Ranchos, yeah, they lost the land, but they got the Bible, and I think they got the better deal.
Okay, again, going down the list, Mark Hong.
Good morning. I'm Mark Hong, Executive and Stated Clerk for the Synod of Southern California and Hawaii. I learned a new label through this gathering, a slasher, which I'm not too hot on. It sounds like something you might hear in Criminal Minds. So I thought about maybe running a contest where the winner of someone who comes up with a new label will be given a 16-day cruise from LA to Hawaii. But I just remember that we set our 2018 budget already, so maybe next year. We serve, the map on your table doesn't really show that well, but we serve the largest synod in our denomination, because we cover the half of Pacific Ocean as well. Yeah, I said that yesterday morning, and I think some people didn't appreciate that. Forrest described quite well what has happened in one part of Southern California. Another part, another presbytery lost 11 congregations. And it wasn't particularly done well, and they're reeling from the after effect of all those dismissals. The changes, obviously, loss of congregation, loss of income, and strength, and all those things. And presbyteries are trying to recover from past several years of events. So the changes are also forcing the transition, and that is, in a way, is evaluating and rethinking about who they are and you know, what is it that the presbytery needs to do. My predecessor, as you well know, Daska Ross, began a great work of being out there, showing up. I hear this comment a lot from many of our members in the Synod that they never knew who the Synod was. Who's the Synod? Well, Daska, I understand, I think during her 6 years of service, visited well over 100 presbytery meetings. Looking at my record, looks like I went to about 21, 22 presbytery meetings, so I guess I'm kind of on a good pace. But being out there, developing relationship, and trying to put our thoughts and our hearts together to see what is it that we as partners in ministry and missions can do. She also began this great gathering of executive presbyteries. We have 7 presbyteries. I know some of you would die for that, but and this year we had 3 gatherings, and looks like we're having a good gatherings, and that's one of the things that I really try to follow, because it's transitional time. I think the leaders of the presbyteries need to come together and share what is it that they're doing well and what is it that they're learning from their own trials and errors, and being a mutual partners in missions and ministry. Another thing is, I really believe, I guess because of my background, I really believe that being a member, being a body of the church is a fun thing to do and fun thing to be. And I just like fellowship with our EPs. And I mean, if you can't get together and have fun with each other and enjoy each other's company, you know, what can we do? As far as the challenges are, lot of things that you all are facing together, that is graying of participation. We need to find some way somehow to recruit and attract our next generation leaders to be more participatory in our mid-council work. Just an example, well, I'd like to start young. I am one of those 25% of all Christians who came to know the Lord through camp and conferences. And so when I began my service and got to know the work and the role a little bit, we have a great conference centers. I'm sure many of you have been there, Zephyr Point. So our synod found some money for next year to send our young people from Southern California full ride to Zephyr Point so that they can experience being a part of the wonderful piece of land. So that kind of thing is something that we're looking to really have more of our next generation participate in the bigger life than just their own congregation. Another challenge is obviously, well, being in a big city, changing demographics and neighborhoods. As Forrest just mentioned in his presbytery, how many languages? 8 languages. And I think San Gabriel has far greater languages that are being spoken on any given Sunday. What does it mean? So when your demographic is changing, your neighbor is changing around you, what is it that you need to do? That's another challenge. I heard from this conference yesterday, I guess, that our denominational growth can take place through racial ethnic groups. Sounds good, and I'm all for it. But how and what do we need to do to make that a reality? Just lastly, making noise. Yeah, I'm also all for that. But come to realize that different individuals have different level of decibel of making noise. I think some are ready to shout. I think some presbyteries are doing really well. And some presbyteries, they're barely making a whimper. But nonetheless, they are beginning to make noise. One thing that I really see, and I'm really glad, is that as I visit the presbyteries, is that, yeah, we went through what we went through the last several years. But we are trying to recapture, reclaim our mission. There are a lot of implications and ramifications that have come about because of several years, but we are recovering and we are on the way to making noise. So thanks be to God.
And next we have Craig Howard.
I'm Craig Howard, and I serve as transitional presbytery leader here in Giddings Lovejoy. And I'm going to ask if they can put my slide up now, and I'm going to talk about my presbytery and what this concept is that we're working on. So here we have 79 congregations, about 14,000 members, 2 new worshiping communities, 2 fellowships. Our congregations, we have 6 African-American congregations and 1 Taiwanese. And one of the things that I did was, when I came here, was to try to figure out what we have. So on this graph, it's along the bottom is membership size of a church. Along the left edge is the amount of contributions in the plate. And the colors are, you see that middle blue? That's the water. You see under the water, the brown? Okay, that's under the water. And then you see above the turquoise, that's the sky. All right. So now to explain it, this is my, and they said, don't call it echo. Well, it's my Echo Environmental PDF. All right, so if you notice, I have, and each of those dots represent a congregation. So if you have a congregation that has 25 members and about $30,000 in income, they're going to fall in that circle in that lower corner. You see that? I have about 16 congregations in that circle, and we call those, we call them deep sixes. We call them congregations that are, that are struggling. We call them 50-50 congregations. You have 50 members or less with $50,000 or less in contributions. Come back to those. Then you come on up a little bit. You have congregations with a few more members, a few more money, but they're still underwater financially. and so, they are the ones you see underwater. Then you have your swimmers. These are congregations somewhere around 85 to 120, 130 members, have a decent income, probably have a full-time pastor, but they got to keep stroking if they're going to make it. This is a congregation that says, we cannot live on our endowment. We have to bring in the contributions. We have to bring in the visitors. We have to do the work of the ministry. Then as you get into the sky, you have this first group of congregations that are, they're doing good. They have the meat, they have the money, they have the people, they have the mission. But some of them are declining, so we call them divers. Because eventually they're going to hit the water, okay? And then you get a little bit higher, you have these congregations that are growing, and we have about 20% of our congregation are growing. I believe any presbytery, you can tell the healthier presbytery, if you have 20% of your congregations have grown in that year, you have a healthy presbytery in our system. And another way to look at it is look over 5 years, how many congregations have actually experienced growth 3 out of the last 5 years, help you determine their health. Well, these hawks, they are strong, growing congregations. And finally, you get them to the upper left corner. You see the eagles? Those are the ones that are very large, very wealthy. They could right now start declining and for a decade before they hit the water. Okay? So you got this crazy system of animal life called a presbytery, and here's the learning. First of all, everyone doesn't want to be an eagle. Everyone doesn't want to be a hawk. People want to be, my swimmers say, we like being swimmers, okay? Second of all, we call them fish because they have learned to live underwater. They've been underwater for decades. They have learned to exist in that way. I have a church, for example, that the maximum capacity of the church is 25 of the building. So when they get 20 people, they're 75% full. And it works for them. I have a church that is very small and it's very old, and every year it has a family and friends day where the people who are part and members come back. They have a wonderful weekend. They have picnics. They have a big service on Sunday. They lift a big offering, an offering big enough for the church to live on for the rest of the year. Okay? They've learned to live underwater. So my job, one of my jobs, is to go and to meet with these congregations and meet with these sessions and find out what's going on, how is it working. And for those that are not working, yes, I believe over the next 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised if we lost 10, 15 churches. Because some of these churches are not doing well, and they're not going to make it. But as a presbytery, you have to decide, what are you going to do about that? Are you just going to sit back and let them just die? Or is there a way to have a healthy death? Or, what are you going to do? I told one group, sometimes I feel bad because I feel like, all right, here's a quick summary and I'm going to shut up. That, some people, you can die because, they starve to death and they die. Some people, you can give them a drug and they can die easy. I said, sometimes I feel like the guy in The Godfather with the pillow over the head when they break into the, and I'm trying to die, And I say that, but, these congregations are people and they have histories, and so there's a sensitivity that has to go with it. But the reality is we got to face it. We got to deal with it. And then just as we challenge our congregations to clean their rolls, guess what, presbyteries? We have to clean our rolls too. That's all I'll say, and then ask questions later. Thank you. Cindy.
And next we're going to hear from Cindy Coleman.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Cindy Coleman, and I serve the presbyteries of Boston and Northern New England as their resource presbyter. And I want to start by giving you a little sense of context. I didn't think to do a fancy graph. So the Presbytery of Boston currently has 22 churches, 6 new worshiping communities. We closed a church about a year ago. We have another church that just requested an AC to close their doors. We've dismissed 2 churches peacefully. We have another church that is in schism, and we're in court with them. Thanks be to God, we have really good pro bono lawyers. Yes. The Presbytery membership at the end of 2016 was 2,387 people. Presbytery of Northern New England, and Presbytery of Boston is what you would expect. It's essentially that greater circle around the city of Boston. Presbytery of Northern New England covers Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and northeast Massachusetts. That presbytery has 28 churches, somewhat equally scattered between the 3 states. We only have 3 congregations, chartered congregations, in that northeastern Massachusetts slice. So 28 churches, 2 ethnic fellowships that have been in existence for decades now, and 2 new worshiping communities. And the 2016 membership for that presbytery was 2,491 people. So my context is 3 states and a half with membership less than 5,000 people. And there are churches in this denomination that have more than 5,000 members. And I'm really grateful to be asked, because part of what we try to do is lift up this part of the reality of the PCUSA. We have always been small. We have never had massive congregations. The largest church in the Presbytery of Boston is around 300 members, 500 in worship. It's the Korean Church of Boston, doing amazing things. That's the biggest thing we've got. After that, 150. In Northern New England, we've got churches that are 150 to 200 members, including the Indonesian congregation that Jay Herbert mentioned yesterday. But most of them are small. Most of them are under 50 members. So for us, 100 members is a big church, and 50 members is a medium-sized church, and 5 to 10 is small. It's a very different context. So the things I wanted to share with you, these 2 presbyteries looking around, I guess they've always been underwater, decided they needed to do something different with their leadership. Northern New England had a full-time executive presbyter. Boston had a 2/3 time general presbyter, and it was clear that that was not sustainable. In 2011, Northern New England created the resource presbyter position. They said, we need a different model of leadership to help our churches connect with the resources that are available in order to thrive, in order to be equipped for their ministry, in order to do what they're being called to do in new and creative ways. And I was invited to step into that position. When the general presbyter in Boston left, I was also serving a congregation in Boston. That presbytery said, we kind of like that model. We like what we've been seeing in our northern neighbor. We'd like to do that too. And they ended up coming together and creating intentionally a shared position. So that means I get to have the honor of connecting these congregations with one another across these boundaries and with the resources that are rich and abundant. There is so much abundance. And our churches are beginning to learn that and experience that and use that abundance. We're also blessed, I believe, in sharing the same stated clerk. That was not intentional. That was the work of the Holy Spirit. And while we are not co-executives, like Tom and Forrest, we work as a team. We travel together to visit churches. We plan leadership training and education events together. We work as a team, and that model has made a huge difference in the culture of both presbyteries. And I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. Another thing we've shifted to over the last 2 years, starting in northern New England, is meeting electronically. You know, we have people who really thought nothing of getting in the car at 5 a.m. and driving 3 to 4 hours for a council meeting or a COM meeting or a CPM meeting, and then getting back in the car and driving home. Well, that's not a good use of people's time. It does not respect their offer of time and talent. So 2 years ago, with input from Northwest Coast Presbytery, we bought a subscription to Adobe Connect. Our leadership commission, which is the council, has met that way for 2 years. We've had one face-to-face meeting, and that was an overnight. And it's working marvelously. Our committee on ministry tiptoed into that. So they have just started meeting with this video conferencing platform. And slowly, small groups in the Presbytery of Boston are saying, well, I don't like sitting in traffic for an hour to an hour and a half for a 7 p.m. meeting. Maybe we can actually do this too. So we're trying to free up the precious time and make it easier for people to participate. Of course, it raises other bars and barriers for those who may not have the technology, who may not have fast enough internet speed, and we're trying to figure out how to address those issues as we come across them. And the last thing I want to say, which has been a gift and a challenge, because there are not a lot of Presbyterians, we do not have multiple congregations, Presbyterian congregations, in the same city or neighborhood. You drive to get to a Presbyterian church. Because of that, we have experienced the growth of diversity in our congregations. Because of our world mission programs that have educated people around the world who now are coming to the U.S. and coming to Boston for education, for jobs in the medical field. They're coming as Presbyterians. They want to worship in Presbyterian churches, so they go find them. And in the Presbytery of Boston, we don't have a single all-white church anymore. Yeah. And it's not intentional. It's not because we did anything. It's because God's at work. Some churches are living into that better than others. Some churches are embracing the people in their pews and their traditions and languages, and there's dancing and drumming and different languages being spoken. And other churches just come together, and it's still very much an Anglo culture worship service. But we've been blessed by that. Of course, the challenge is, again, as Jay Herbert has raised up, and you may have heard in some of the workshop sessions, as there's increased pressure on people without permanent status, we feel that in our congregations. And so both presbyteries are wrestling with how do we support, with very limited resources, congregations that are in crisis because of immigration. We have 5 Brazilian new worshiping communities, and many of those members are afraid to go to church because the government knows that's where they can be found. So that's a challenge that we are wrestling with. At the same time, I'm grateful that we know our neighbors well enough that they invite us into that challenge. We've done a good enough job choosing welcome that our brothers and sisters from different countries and different languages come to us and ask for help. So that's our context and our joy. And I would say there are many more joys than challenges. Thanks.
Next we have Warren Lassane, but let me say something first. Sarah Dingman, who is the Synod Executive for Lincoln Trails, was supposed to be on the panel this morning. She had a situation arise that caused her to have to leave early this morning. And so she begs forgiveness from folks for not being present. But Warren was gracious enough to offer to step in. So thanks to Warren.
Thank you, Kerry, and good morning, my siblings in Christ. I'm going to say three things in my remarks today, and I hope that you can see a picture of the region that I am honored to serve. I want to talk first about context, secondly about the challenges in the context, and then thirdly about some of the strategies that we are beginning to use to be faithful to Christ in the ministry. I serve the Synod of the Mid-Atlantic, and on your little, if you have those maps there, it's kind of a little salmon area over on the East Coast. It's not, for me, it's large geographically, but comparative to other folk, it's a small, and it clearly doesn't take in the Pacific Ocean like my misguided brother here might state. But what I want to say is the Synod of the Mid-Atlantic has the largest population of Presbyterians and churches within the denomination. We encompass the areas or the states of Delaware, District of Columbia, all of Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, and we even we move into 7 counties in West Virginia. We have one non-geographical Korean presbytery that takes in the Mid-Atlantic region, but it also goes down into South Atlantic, taking in South Carolina and Georgia, and it also has one church in where my brothers and sisters, or my siblings in Colorado, has one church there. Out of the 10 largest presbyteries in the denomination, Mid-Atlantic has 5 of them. And if you say out of the 20th largest presbyteries, Mid-Atlantic has 8 of them. Therein lies, I think, some of the blessings, but also some of the challenges in terms of size. Mid-Atlantic also is noted for having the largest population of African Americans in the denomination, as well as African American congregations. Herein is a blessing, but also is a challenge. When I talk about Mid-Atlantic, I have to always go back to around 2006, 2007, when a major restructuring took place, I think maybe with all synods, and particularly hit Mid-Atlantic Synod. By the way, this synod was the last of the 16 synods put together after reunion. And some of that had to do with this region had 4 historically African American councils. It had 3 all-black presbyteries, and it had an inter-presbytery agency that functioned as a synod, which provided funding and staffing and support for that particular region. And so through reunion, 1983, that disappeared. And then in 2006, 2007, when the synod was reorganized, an interesting thing happened also. Mission funding ceased, staffing design was reduced, per capita was reduced, budget, administration function was created for the synod. The size of the synod assembly was reduced significantly from a couple of hundred down to 30. What that resulted in is that racial ethnic leadership participation and representation around tables were lost. Caucuses were told to do your own thing, survive at your own risk. All the racial ethnic ministries ended as a part of that. All the advocacy groups that would sit around council table no longer sat around, not even Presbyterian women or Presbyterian men or CW, Committee of Women of Color. So again, a part of what's going on. The question that the Senate has been asking itself since GA gave out the mandate in 220th Assembly was, what is God calling the Synod of the Mid-Atlantic to be, and whom are we called to serve? And we've been discerning and really working with that for quite some time now, and I think we've come to almost a decision. So I'm going to throw out some things here, so don't hold me to it, because it's almost. Charlotte is in our region. And about a year and so ago, there was a breakout rioting demonstration. Baltimore is in our region. And then there was Charlottesville is in our region. So many of our meetings are geared around Synod Assembly meetings. We meet twice a year. They're geared around race reconciliation. I mean, getting into the weeds, helping people to talk about stuff, using the Bell-Ha Confession and other resources. And at this past Synod Assembly, we had a pastor, Presbyterian pastor, Westminster Presbyterian Church, to come out of Charlottesville and to talk to us, who was out in the weeds, an Episcopal priest to come and talk to us in the weeds, and several other folk. You have to pull to me when I'm time to stop. So, context, challenge, strategy. As Synod of the Living Waters is noted for living waters for the well, and I see my colleague Terry over there. As Synod of the Sun, and I'm not sure where Valerie is noted for solar panels. The question and opportunity we saw at our last Synod meeting in Synod of the Mid-Atlantic, given that many African American churches are dying on the vine and leadership is far and in between, might the Synod of the Mid-Atlantic be the body that helps to identify, nurture, recruit the next generation of African American leadership for the past, for the churches, the councils of the Presbyterian Church? And there are all kinds of implications for that in terms of what we fund and what we don't fund, whether this will be a priority, who will be the partners, and so forth. So that's where we are, and I will pause there.
And Tamara.
Good morning. I'm Tamara Williams. I'm Stated Clerk in the Presbytery of Charlotte. Charlotte Presbytery is the third largest Presbyterian denomination. We have currently 99 churches and about 31,500 members. In 2012, the Presbytery of Charlotte went through a very challenging, difficult, and very painful downsizing of our staff from 12 down to 3. The structure that was in place for our presbytery was very much built, programs, the structure itself was built around having a 12-member staff, a very staff-driven type of program. And when we reduced down to 3, that structure didn't change, but we had 3 people trying to do the work of 12. Obviously, that's not going to work very well. One of the things that we realized in the following year, we had to do something pretty drastic. We hired a transitional general presbyter, Betty Meadows, and when she came into our presbytery, one of the first things that she went about doing was trying to help us to organize what we called an Emmaus team. Our presbytery appointed 11 persons to an Emmaus team. They hired a consultant to help them try to figure out, okay, how do we get out to our churches, to our presbyteries, and find out what the needs are and how we can restructure everything. The first thing they did was to hold 23 World Cafes throughout the presbytery. They were very well attended. Like I said, the first thing they did was to go try to listen to the people in the pew. Those listening sessions, they listened, and they listened, and they listened some more. We had 87 of our churches that participated in those World Cafes, which was phenomenal for us. The questions that they came up with to ask at the World Cafes were, they had, describe the church that Jesus would want. How much of the church that Jesus would want are you already doing? And of the church that Jesus would want, where would you want to begin to create that type of church? And once they came up with that, they got together. The Emmaus team worked very, very hard and wrote up what they thought the vision of our presbytery was going to be based on what those folks at the World Cafes had shared. And after that, they kind of passed the baton on to the next group, another group of 11. Some of those persons from the Emmaus team continued on this next group. It was a strategic planning task force that set about actually trying to put some meat on those bones that they got. They took those answers that they received and started working on a new structure for the presbytery. Just like our form of government, the idea was to make this a lot lighter, a lot more flexibility, and something that could be handled more in committees, in churches, rather than trying to be staff-driven, because we got like 3.5 people now on staff, so it's not like it's going up. The main focus of this new structure is to build relationships and to strengthen congregations. Relationships building was a major point in all of this, because our presbytery was very disconnected. Those in rural churches, smaller churches, did not feel like their voices were being heard. They felt like the presbytery didn't care about their work. So it was important to make sure that we got to the really hard work of rebuilding and strengthening relationships. Our new structure has, of course, the basic ecclesiastical committees with council, CORs, PJC. Our COM is much larger because they're trying to do a lot more work in supporting the churches. And CPM, we have an admin committee that kind of deals with a lot of the fiduciary, stewardship type things from personnel. But the heart and soul of this new structure is what we call our Ministry Resource Committee. The Ministry Resource Committee is going to be contacting regularly every church session throughout the presbytery several times a year to find out what is God doing with you and your community, and what can they do to help support that. Some of it could be through grants. It could be helping to find resources, helping them to partner with other congregations. One of the things that we're doing is trying to get churches and congregations to form ministry teams. Some of that could be, with other Presbyterian churches in the community, but it could also, be ecumenical in nature. The ministry teams, partnerships, mission team type things, in order to be able to work together to develop ministries that will support the folks in their community, the people that are out there that they see a need. A couple of examples that we've got. Laundry ministry called Suds of Love. We have a group of a kind of a suburb north of Charlotte, Kannapolis. There are 5 or 6 churches in that area that the Sons of Love, we had some immigrant communities where folks were, low income, trying to get to doing laundry. They didn't have washers and dryers at homes. Folks volunteer. They, pay for doing laundry, meeting at a laundromat and washing, folding, doing laundry for so that children can go to school with clean clothes. We had just a couple of churches that started that, and when people heard about it, we want to join you. Just tell us the time and the place. Our church folks will come out and do the same thing. Community gardens. More of our churches are starting to work together on community gardens, and some of them are just doing it for their own congregations to some degree, but some of them are doing it on a larger scale, helping to support some other local ministries in Charlotte and other cities. We have, many of our African American churches and white churches are partnering to do Bible studies, book reads, anti-racism training, getting together, like kind of come to my hood, inviting each other into different folks' homes to have a backyard barbecue or fish fry or whatever, just trying to get to know their neighbors, something we're really excited about. And we have one called God's Garden. This is a couple of our churches in a pretty rural part of our presbytery. There are 3 churches out there, one's Presbyterian, one Methodist, and one Baptist, that are sharing land, growing crops, and giving away 60,000 pounds of food to local ministries in their area. So those are the kinds of things that we're excited about in our presbytery, is kind of seeing how this new structure is going to go forward. We've been having listening sessions to kind of introduce the new structure, and the buy-in has been off the charts. Everybody is excited about it, so we are really, really looking forward to seeing how we kind of rising from the ashes. So, thank you.
Okay, so you've heard from 6 of your colleagues. What we'd like you to do is to gather around table, and if you're alone or you've just got a couple, you might want to consider going to a new table to join with others. But what we'd like you to do is to think about what you heard, what rings true for you in your context. What didn't you hear that you would like to lift up as one of the challenges or a strategy for meeting those challenges that you've identified in your context? So we're going to give you about 15 minutes or so for those conversations. And then we're going to come back and we'll do some Q&A as well as some reporting out if you'd like to share from your table conversations. So about 15 minutes from now.